Hey guys, Calendros here. All right, so we got a bit of a late start to the videos this week. Um, it was it's been a kind of a crazy week. I was supposed to have 3 days off this week, but that certainly did not happen. Um, I lost one of my days off because some people on my team were sick, so I had to cover. So that's the way it goes. Anyways, we're gonna do something we've never done on this channel, which is a black metal song. Um, I think a lot of people have a somewhat of a negative connotation towards black metal, and I think part of that is probably intended by black metal musicians. I think have a certain aesthetic that they like to cultivate, and um, so I think they play up some of that stuff. And what I wanted to do with this song that we're going to do tonight is show a slightly different side to black metal. So, and but before we jump into that, the shirt was like kind of the most black metal shirt that I had, which is it's from a friend of mine who's a Twitch streamer. He found a really terrible black metal song called "Sterile Nails and Thunderbowels," I think is what it was called, by the band Silencer. Silencer is like suicidal, depressive, black metal. So it's, which is a style. It is a subgenre of black metal, and this stuff is just, I think it's terrible. It's just, to me, it's just garbage. Um, it's amusing in a in a way until you read up on the history of the band, and then it's just very sad. But you're never really sure with that particular band how true the stories were about. Like the rumors were that like the vocals were because like he would cut himself in studio, and to get like these weird like painful yelps and like golem like sounds. It's not like, and I mean musically I didn't really even think it was very interesting. There's a couple of riffs that are cool in the song, but it was yeah, not my kind of black metal. So which hopefully I didn't offend too many of my fans through that are are watching that might like black metal, but they're definitely not from me. But this band is from Norway. The band is called, I believe it's pronounced Vindir, um, almost as if like a German type pronunciation. I think. I've read different things online. Some people said it's just pronounced Windir. Some people said that it's Vindir in New Norwegian. Um, so the interesting thing is this song title that for the song that we're doing is actually in Old Norse, not modern Norwegian, the title is, I believe, pronounced Fagning. I believe is the correct pronunciation. I was lucky enough to find a translation of the lyrics because the song is in Norwegian. So we'll be going over the lyrics at the end, and it's very interesting. I didn't choose the song for the lyrics. I actually didn't know if I would be able to find lyrics for the song. It's just a song I really heard once or twice. I think really all the way through only once, and immediately loved it. So, and I was looking to do a black metal song, so this went on my list. There are other black metal songs that I know better that I probably could have done, but this is kind of almost like a reaction for me. So I thought that would be cool to maybe go a little bit more into this as somebody who had only heard the song, you know, once all the way through, which is not something that's typical for this channel. So this is going to be a rather unique situation, I feel like. So the song is called Fagning by Windir. So we're going to do that now, and some folk Viking black metal coming at you. Whew. Um, Man, I think that might be the best black metal song I've ever heard. Um, because for me, like a lot of the benchmarks are like, uh, you know, some of the stuff by Emperor. I always really liked Inno Acetana. Um, and I mean, Darkthrone has some great stuff. Uh, but I'm just not. I'm not a super well versed black metal guy. I love Batushka. Um, I'm okay with Magua. Um, I think with them, it's the repetition bothers me a little bit. Um, but what's interesting to me is this song doesn't have any of those sort of problems that you often find with like the classic black metal bands like Dark Throne or Mayhem, where there's a lot of like heavy reliance on tremolo picking and you know just not a ton of variation. The song had atmosphere. It had, um, I mean, it has some incredible riffs in it too. Um, so I took mental notes kind of a little bit throughout, and um, at a certain point, I just sort of kind of got lost in the song and wasn't really making mental notes anymore. But it seemed like about every minute or so there was a major change. Now, the first really interesting thing happened at about 30 or 40 seconds in, where there was this sort of synth dance beat, which sounds weird, but it's actually something that Vindir is actually known for because Journey to the End, which is probably their most well known song, has like a 4 minute long section to end the song like that. And I think for people who have never heard the band before, it might be off putting or strange. But when you hear a song like this and understand the context within their larger tapestry of how they write a song, it makes a lot more sense. And they they're really a band that more so than a lot of other black metal embraces the epicness of their mother country, you know. And one of the things that I love about black metal, um, Jesus, freaking neighbors. One of the things that I love about black metal is that really, they just, there's so much pride in where they're from and their tradition. And I think in a lot of ways, like especially as an American, we really don't have a ton of stuff where we're like bursting with like our own traditional like pride in who we are because part of it is we're such a melting pot, right? But I feel like when you look at a country like Norway or Sweden or some of these other just the country itself is so evocative, you know, um, and I mean when you look at a band like Immortal, which writes a lot of songs about like the cold Norwegian winter and stuff like that, and it's like you it evokes a lot of like emotions, and it also one of the things that metal always does very well is paint a visual picture in your mind, right? So you get this visual of like this like frozen tundra, and the sad irony is that unfortunately, the gentleman who was the lead singer and band leader for Vendir actually died from exposure um, when he was trying to cross a fjord in pretty nasty weather. I mean, it's it's a sad end to a guy who, from his lyrics, seemed like he was a very, very introspective person. Like when we get to these lyrics, you'll see that there's a lot of there's there's the traditional black metal feelings, um, but there's also a a realization in a way that it's that mindset is incredibly destructive. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this band. And I don't know how accurate this translation is. I mean, I hope that it is, but I think it really speaks to um, the man and his understanding of himself and his ability to look at this larger culture that he's a part of and sort of understand both the positives and the negatives to it. And they're a band that really seems to embrace that um, folk metal, Viking metal aspect, and you hear it a lot in the music. So, like at the 34-minute mark, we had that break, and that's a little unusual. But then we go into after that a what's a really cool part that is repeated multiple times throughout the song. Just twice in a row here, broken up by another one of those synth beats, and then at the end again. And this section is like very much a traditional black metal section, with the addition of these really great like folk metal lead parts that are going on underneath, and just give it this very much of an epic feeling that you don't often find in traditional um, like black metal, like your Mayhems or um, you get it in Emperor, I feel like, but it's different in Emperor. In Emperor, it's this sort of atmospheric, dark majesty, for lack of a better word. With Vindir, it's very much more of a folk metal feeling. It kind of, in a way, it reminds me a lot of Winter Sun in terms of how they write for epicness. And, so then we have those two sections, and then my favorite part of this song is it like around the 420 mark. There's just this absolutely killer break and riff, and I love it so much. And then the real shock, and I don't know that I really picked up on this the first time I listened to the song, was the clean vocals, right? So he goes from using a very traditional black metal scream to these awesome folky, again very Winter Sun esque clean vocals that are they're just beautiful, majestic, and I feel like there's a significance to the fact that the first part of the song is sung in one particular style, and the second half of the song largely is sung in a clean style. And I think it's to differentiate points of view in the lyrics. So we'll get to that when we get to the lyrical analysis. But I feel like there was a reasoning behind why he chose this sort of vocal style as opposed to that for particular points in the song. So, and this was sort of where I really got into the song. So I wasn't so much searching for different riffs and things like that, or paying attention to the timestamps to pull out different things to talk about. But um, this song is incredibly progressive. It's it's changing all throughout the song, but at the same time, there's always that sort of connecting thread throughout the whole thing. Um, and then towards the end, they bring back the riff from the beginning that was used in verse 2 and verse 3. And then close out the song with a slightly sped up version of that riff. Um, and of course, with tremolo picking and all that kind of fun stuff. Um, I really, really love this song. And having really only listened to it once, you know, completely, There was so much stuff I picked up on this second time through. Just this song is an incredibly deep and layered song. From a musical standpoint, we haven't even gotten into the lyrics yet. So, I mean, this band is incredible. It's really sad when you look at this material. Losing this gentleman was a big loss because this guy is very creative, very introspective, great vocalist, very versatile vocalist. I don't know if he played any other instruments like guitar or anything like that. A lot of these guys are multi-instrumentalists, so there's a good chance he also plays another instrument as well. So the song has just from a musical standpoint is like an easy nine and a half. But then we need to look at the lyrics, right? So the first verse, and again, disclaimer, guys, this is translated. I cannot speak to the quality of the translation of this. This was like the only good translation I could find. And some of these words obviously are modified to make more sense in English. So not a direct translation, because a direct translation would be kind of word salady. So the first verse here, they have felt that the kingdom has no king. The longing for mercy is great in a war like this. Hard times it has been for the kingdom, but soon all will be as it was. So I don't want to talk about that before I go into the second verse, because the second verse gives context, I think, for the first verse. It is the devil he believes in, Svar. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. With his dark arts. But the devil gives only for a time. In the end, it's always betrayal. That is an incredibly insightful line coming from a black metal band. But not at all unusual, though, because there's a lot of black metal bands that actually seem to very much understand the nature of the devil and evil. And I think Windir never gave me the vibe that they were a satanic black metal band, because not a lot of people assume that all black metal bands are satanic, which is nothing could be further from the truth. It's not true at all. Black metal has nothing to do with Satanism. Now, it's tied to it because of some of the past, but there's a lot of black metal acts that are completely focused on the folk aspect of it, paganism, and stuff like that, which as opposed to Satanism, because they're two totally different things. So what I think the first verse is saying, that the people have felt for a while, that they were lacking in leadership, and that the current king that they have, this King Svar, he believes in the devil and darkness and evil. But the people are understanding that there's a need for mercy in a time of war such as this, and that the power that you get from the devil may seem like it's powerful, but in the end, you're always betrayed. Which, is really, I mean, it just is very deep lyricism, and this is translated. I'm sure it's much more poetic, I believe, probably in their native tongue, but I'm sure we're doing it a huge disservice by translating it to English. But I think it really just goes to show how great the songwriting is for this stuff. Um, I think it sounds like this king is sort of like a warmongering type of king that believes in, you know, um, domination and conquer and, and that and the strength. Um, but that line about the longing for mercy is great in a war like this is really a powerful line because it's talking about the importance of when you talk about rules of engagement, okay, in conflict, in war, there's rules of engagement, right? And there's some of that, there's some gray area there, like, how do you handle prisoners of war, things like that. But I think a lot of them are, and this is why we have what are deemed as war crimes, because there's some things that, like, even in war, people agree are just too far beyond, right? And I think that is what this is saying, that there's a longing for mercy, even even in a time of conflict and a time of war. The third verse goes on to say, "Against Sver, the priest shall be killed; the steel shall not rest in its sheath. Whatever is before us will be slain. Let Sognamal rule their own lands." So I believe so that this. I don't know if this is like a fantasy type story or if this is based on past history. Um, Obviously, the Sogndal, however you pronounce that, it are the people that we talked about in the first verse, right? And what they're saying is that Sever is killing everybody, killing everything before him, killing holy priests, and in the end, the belief is that it would be better for the Sogndal and the actual people to rule their own lands. So really, this is this is a plea for democracy of sorts. Um, we promise the gods a victory, yet I will not be called king in a kingdom like this, where an illegitimate child can claim a crown. With sword in hand, it is unusual to throw food at dogs and ravens. Now, that last line sounds like wacky translation, but I looked that last phrase up, and it's actually a metaphor for, like, they talk about like throwing chunks of meat at a dog. It's kind of that same principle, right? So they're saying, we promise the gods of war this great victory, yet from the perspective of the person, and this is the part that's sung with clean vocals. This person who's singing, it seems to shift perspective, and he's saying, I don't want to be a king in a kingdom if this is the way we're going to behave. If our king can be this bloodthirsty murderer who apparently was an illegitimate child, so was not actually next in line for the throne, but somehow became the king. And then I think what they're saying is that we're basically just throwing meat, at dogs essentially, and that last line is, I think, is one that just doesn't translate well because there are certain things that if you translated them from English would make no sense to somebody from Norway or somebody from Germany or what have you. And then this last verse is, shameful memories of deeds he has done torments his mind. No harm undone that causes pain. The price paid is happiness. High priced it is to lay waste upon Christian lands with fire. So that last line, again, is from the same perspective, I believe, as the verse before. So I think we changed perspectives here when the vocals changed. And it seemed like the person who's speaking, that's using the clean vocals, is saying that he's tormented by what he did in the name of the king. And I guess the king had this crusade against Christian invaders. But again, that is a common theme in black metal, because people, I think, again, assume that it's about Satanism, but it was less about Satanism than more and more about the hatred towards the church for invading their land and taking their culture from them. And this is not like this is not some hyperbole. That is actually what the missionaries were doing, and it was wrong. And I think when you look at some of the Christians who have reacted to black metal, I think especially if you go and listen to Vin and Sori, Vin does a really good job of owning up to that side of what they did to these lands that they came into, and really took away their culture, their way of life, and what made their cultures unique and beautiful, and tried to strip them away and force Christianity upon them. And so their response, especially by the younger rebellious kids, was to write heavy metal, extolling the virtues of Satan, and burning churches, and and all this stuff. And it really is all a backlash towards what was being done to their culture. And I think that's a part that's misunderstood in this equation. Now, there's a lot more going on underneath the surface when you look at some of the really terrible stuff that happened in the black metal. Like people killing each other, stabbing. There was somebody from Emperor stabbed, somebody who was a homosexual, a bunch of times. There was a lot of stuff that was more. It was more than just that, but a lot of that is the current that connected a lot of these black metal bands, and I think some of that animosity exists even today, to an extent, and I mean, I think a lot of that is pretty justified, really. But there were some bands, and of course, we're talking about kids. We're talking about angry teenagers who were really pushing the envelope in terms of violent content in lyrics, and imagery. And I think it, in some ways, it just sort of took on a life of its own, and you saw bands like Emperor and Mayhem really get sucked into the really dark and nasty end of that, and it resulted in people being dead, people in prison. It's I mean, in some ways, there were benefits to be had from it in terms of, if it had not been for him going to prison, I don't think you ever would have had Short, probably mispronounced his name, sorry, create Reincarnation. I don't think the band ever would have happened, because it seemed like his time in prison very much affected the man, and he really was changed by his experience, and becoming a father and things like that, and that's what Light of Day of Darkness is about. That, all of that, really. His internal conflicts. He sadly lost one child, and then in a very short span was gifted with another child, which has got to create a really crazy dichotomy internally. And I think that's why when you listen to Light of Day, Day of Darkness, there's a lot of stuff that, where he talks about insanity and feeling like he's going insane. And I think that is that clash, the being overjoyed about, having a new child, and then the incredible sadness of losing your previous child. So, I mean, it's really interesting how black metal has developed and changed over time, but in the end, a lot of it still comes back to these last couple lines in this song. And but this is great because this is a really mature, I think, healthy and completely understandable way of approaching what happened, right? And you look at this and you're like, they understand, the protagonist here understands the danger in this sort of rebellious, just destroy everything attitude, right? And it's really such a beautiful song, such a I mean, it's got great riffs too. I mean, there's this song has it all. It's got atmosphere, fantastic clean vocals, fantastic screamed vocals. Excuse me, fantastic like black metal vocals. It's just there's really not much wrong with this song. Honestly, to me, this is a classic, and it's an easy 10 for me. When you look at, if you're talking about putting this in a black metal vault, so to speak, I would say this will definitely be up there. And I think it was a very dark day when we lost. What was his name? I'm not going to be able to pronounce it for certain. Valfar. And I think losing Valfar really, it's sad because it really shows, this guy really understood, and he wrote songs too about depression, Journey to the End. Like, I mean, it's not like this guy knew he was going to die. He was not, he didn't have a terminal illness. He was a relatively young man. He just was writing about depression and the weight and understanding of his own death. And I think it's just unfortunate that we lost this guy because, man, his... the songwriting is incredible. The lyrics, I think, from what we can see, I mean, we're making some extrapolations based on a translation, so we don't know for certain, but yeah, this is great stuff. So 10 out of 10 for me. I think that's it. And keep an eye out this week. We've got the Witherfall reaction. That's going to be a big one because I'm going to spend a lot of time breaking that one down. I don't know what day. Probably Friday is when I'll do that one. We've got a reaction, a clean, cold reaction to a death metal band. I believe it's a death metal band that was recommended to me by the guys from Gershok. Shout out to X. And a reaction to a band. This was from a couple of my subscribers. A band called La Dispute. That's gonna be a live one, I think. We're gonna do a live reaction. Like as in the song is live. I think it's Audio Tree live. So I'm kind of expecting some sort of postmodern or post metal to this, but I don't really even know completely what to expect. So, but just that several people have recommended them, so uh, I have fairly high expectations. And then the last one I really want to do is I want to do and this is an unusual one. I want to do a side by side breakdown, to an extent, of Living Color's cover of Who Shot Ya, originally done by Christopher Biggie Smalls Wallace, Notorious B.I.G. I was never really a huge Notorious B.I.G. fan. I mean, I liked him. I'm not a big rap guy in general, but I liked his stuff. I was more of a Tupac guy. Um, but he's a legend. So I thought it was cool when they dropped their new album last year, and this was one of the tracks on it. And it's not obviously, because it's a rap song, it's not a 100%, straight up cover. They really reworked a lot of stuff in the song. But I had sent this to Vin, because he's a big fan of Notorious B.I.G. And he commented that he was sad that they didn't keep the rhythm, the melody and stuff. And they actually did. And I wanted to do a breakdown of that to sort of show how they kept the original melody intact, where they changed it, and what stuff they took out, and maybe why they took it out. So that'll be one. That'll be a bonus one. Hopefully I get to it this week. But that's what we're looking at for the rest of the week. Thanks for sitting through this. Hope you enjoyed the song. If you like Vindir, definitely check them out. Their stuff is incredible. They really don't have any bad albums. They don't have that many albums. So definitely check them out. Stay metal, guys.